What's up, guys? It's Rafi. Today we are going to try to record our first video. Let me give some context real quick. It is Ramadan, which means that I can't eat or drink while the sun is up and a bunch of other things. It's a Muslim holiday. It's cool. So if it looks like I'm dying, it's because my spirit is literally the closest it has ever been to God, like both metaphorically and I'm literally about to just pass out from malnutrition. This is, like I said, going to be the first video I'm making, so I am incredibly nervous. I hope that my delivery is okay, but hopefully over time I get better at this, and maybe if I do a few more of these I won't be as amateur-y. So the reason why I'm making this video is because I'm noticing a lot of the discussions around this topic aren't exactly positive. Whether that be because the conversations around this are shrouded in confusion, misunderstanding. There seems to be a lot of aggression around this topic. I'm not seeing a lot of healthy discussion going on. And most of the discussion I am seeing are between like-minded individuals already, so there's not really any growth happening there either. The people that should be listening to this seem to be getting attacked during these discussions, and it's not really an environment that you can grow from. So I'm hoping that maybe with this video I can shed some light on this topic, explain it a little bit better, and just try to get really factual and logical about it. So the topic that I actually want to discuss today is white privilege, or white skin privilege. There's a few different names for it, but we should all kind of know what it is. But if you don't, here's a literal definition of it. White privilege, or white skin privilege, is the societal privilege that benefits people whom society identifies as white in some countries, beyond what is commonly experienced by non-white people under the same social, political, or economic circumstances. So what that means is that white privilege is basically the term used to describe the differences in experience, the positive difference in experience that white people have versus non-white people in most European-based countries, specifically for this video, America. The issue with this topic is that, like I said, there's a lot of confusion around it. Part of that is kind of basic misunderstandings of the words white and privilege. So let's try to break that down real quick. A privilege is defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group of people. So the important thing to remember about this is that the part that's a privilege are the benefits that you get from it. And then whiteness is very complex. In future videos I hope to get into race, but for this video let's give a nice quick definition. We'll count whiteness as typically being of European descent, having fairer skin, maybe blonde, brunette hair, things like that, things that are associated with whiteness, a good credit score, things like that. So those together basically mean the special rights or benefits given to white people for their whiteness. Nothing that they earned, just something that's inherently there because of the way society is structured at the moment. So I noticed a lot in this discussion, there's a lot of aggression, typically from white people and then sometimes from non-white people, where I'm seeing things like white people saying they won't apologize for their white privilege, or that it doesn't exist, or that they won't apologize for being white. And when I was seeing these discussions, I would always say, no one's asking you to. I don't see anyone saying apologize for being white, until I realized that there are a lot of people that are think that white privilege means that white people should feel bad about being white, or that they are their struggles are discredited. But that's not the case. Whenever I saw these conversations, I see white people saying, where is my white privilege when I couldn't afford groceries, or where was my white privilege when I got shipped off to Iraq, or where was my white privilege when I did get arrested by a cop that one time. And then on the flip side, I'm seeing black people tell white people that their white privilege is keeping them rich, those specific people, or that their white privilege is going to guarantee that they have a good job. And I think a lot of that aggression around the topic is because a lot of white people and minorities feel like white privilege discredits any type of struggles that they've had in their lives. They're saying that because you're white you can't have problems, and that's not the case. That is not what white privilege is about at all, which further shows that this topic has a lot of confusion around it. So what white privilege actually is kind of a mixture of two things, some basic human psychology and some basic mathematics. White people make up about 72% of the US population right now, which means that any issue that affects white people as a whole affects 72% of the US population, which means things like drug abuse or even hard rock or cultural difference get taken a lot more seriously because white people make up 72% of the US population. On the flip side, if an issue affects minorities, even if it affected every minority in America, it would still only affect about 30% of the population. When you take that into account, it kind of makes sense why a lot of times these issues that you think should affect more people because they're minorities really don't get a lot of voice. They're only affecting 30% of the population. I'm not excusing these. I'm just trying to give some good basis for why these happen. So that's the basic mathematics of it. The human psychology comes into play when you take into account that all animals, human beings included, have a tendency to treat things that look like them with a little bit more familiarity. And that is a completely logical response to that. When you grow up in a white household, you can see other white people and associate them with cousins or your father figures or family members. You just have a little bit more connection to them just completely based off the color of your skin. Same way as a black person, you probably feel a little bit more comfortable around other black people. Or if you're Hispanic, you just have a connection there that already starts based on skin color alone. And that's not a bad thing. That makes a lot of sense. Cats need to know other cats that look like them, because in the wild you need to make decisions like that really quickly, and looking at things is a pretty good way to judge whether or not you can interact with them in the way you'd like to. You can also take this into account when you consider that white people do make up such a large majority of the population, that when an incident happens that would discredit white people, so when you have a white shooter or a crazy white kid or these other white incidents that would be negative, it's a lot easier to sweep those under the rug and say that they're not a representative of this large population of people. Versus black people, African Americans or Hispanics, when you do something, you're representing a much smaller portion of the population. So judgments based on one person's actions have a lot more base on them. Even if it's not fair, it has a lot more logical basis to blame an entire race than it would be if a white person did something, just based on the math alone. If I say 1 out of 30 versus 1 out of 72, statistically, I seem a lot worse on that 1 out of 30 than that other person does on that 1 out of 72. And that's kind of a huge part of what plays into white privilege, is that white people do not need to represent themselves in the same way that minorities would, and the power structures that play in America. White people have the benefit of, typically, if you meet an authority figure, he's going to be white. If you see rich people on television, they're probably going to be white, because there's so many more white people. There's so many more white success stories, and the history of America has been pretty favorable to white people even now. There are families that are rich right now because of things that were established during slave times, or there's families that are rich now, white families, for things that happened when black people weren't allowed an equal opportunity, or minorities weren't allowed an equal opportunity. Asians built an entire railroad that white people became rich for. Japanese people just recently were in internment camps, and I mean recently was in the last century, not 2 weeks ago. But these are things that white people don't really have to worry about being in their history. They don't have to worry about those things affecting them in the present day. So I can see why there is a lot of aggression around this issue, because a lot of people that are around now really can't see the connection to history that is affecting them today. So when a white person is accused of having white privilege, they can't see the benefits that they've reaped from something that happened a very long time ago, because those things aren't directly affecting them, they're passively affecting them. These ideals and the way our entire culture is set up has been so ingrained in everything that we do that at this point it's kind of odd to call these things out. It's weird to try to differentiate between a world without white privilege and a world with white privilege, because white privilege is so deeply ingrained in society now. So when you try to talk and have this conversation, it's almost unnatural, because a lot of people can't even fathom the fact that they are privileged. And there's a lot of people that can't fathom the fact that this privilege doesn't work the way they think it does. People, human beings, all of us have a really hard time being empathetic. We have a hard time putting ourselves in other people's shoes, or even listening to views that are different than ours. We get in that fight or flight situation, makes us really clam up, doesn't really lead to a positive growth in any manner because we aren't ready to listen. But everything I said could totally be not listened to. You can listen to everything and just be like, I don't believe him. So let me try to break some stuff down. I'll try to give some examples of things I've heard talked about with white privilege. And then I'll try to give some really hard factual things that really shouldn't be able to be argued with. But I'm sure people will do it anyway. White people typically serve much lighter sentencing for the exact same crimes as if they were committed by minorities. White people typically get off the hook for more things. White people typically have better interactions with the police. White people can say that they've had 44 out of 45 presidents. White people typically have opportunities for better housing. When gentrification occurs, white people typically don't have to worry about that affecting them in the same way it would black people. And typically, white people's interactions with America as a society have a lot less weight to them than minorities do, as I previously explained. But at the same time, all those instances could maybe be explained by the people working those jobs. Maybe it's not the fact that white people have some type of inherent privilege that allows them to be killed at a disproportionate rate when compared to black people. There's a lot more white people. White people get shot almost twice as much for raw numbers as minorities, but if we go in population, black people getting shot by police is a lot more effective on the population, their population as a whole. And maybe the reason for those prison sentencings and those jail sentencing are because of the judges that work there. Maybe that's not like a white person thing. That maybe not has nothing to do with it. Maybe the better housing opportunities has nothing to do with white privilege or gentrification. Maybe it's just that white people are a little quicker on the jump to buy nice houses. Who knows? But there are some inarguable examples of white privilege. Things that maybe you don't even think about because you wouldn't really need to. White people typically get better car insurance rates, something that really can't be explained other than the fact that it's because they're white. Even having more black people in your neighborhood or more minorities in your neighborhood can lead to higher insurance rates. Not as high as if you were in an all-black neighborhood, but things like being in contact with minorities can affect things like that. White people have the highest drug use or drug abuse per capita by far in America, but that is not reflected in the incarceration rates shown between minorities and white people. Black people and minorities are nearly 6 times more likely to be arrested for drug-related offenses, which clearly isn't because they use drugs more. It's because they're targeted for drug use more. There's a stigma around them that allows cops to try to find drugs on black people that they wouldn't really associate with white people, even though clearly there should at least be an equal amount of suspicion on both ends. This also applies to laws that have been set in places in the South where it's legal to racially profile people to figure out Hispanics if they're legally here or not. It also affects Hispanics out here legally in a very unfair way. Cops are allowed to target them. Even if they're here legally, they can still be targeted. They can be shown to prove that they should be here. They can be asked questions, all because they're not white. That is not an issue that a white person would have to deal with, or maybe a fair-skinned, blonde Hispanic person wouldn't have to either. But all those things and all the factors that play into white privilege doesn't mean that it's in some kind of insurmountable, unfixable thing. The first part about fixing it is acknowledging that it's real. That's the first thing you have to do with any problem before you can actually do anything about it. You have to accept that it's a thing. White people shouldn't be getting attacked for being white. And if you're a minority whose plan for fixing the world is fuck all white people, that's not going to work either, because once again, they are 72% of the American population. That means for an issue to become an issue, we have to make it a white issue, which means we need a lot of understanding about this topic. We need a lot of love around this. This isn't going to be something that we can argue out of, because on a raw number scale, they're going to win every single time. And it doesn't have to be a they're going to win thing. It has to be an us trying to get better as a society. So we should try to open up more discussion, more forums around this, try to get a mutual understanding of this issue so we can move forward and maybe try to correct it. There's nothing we really do about the past. There's nothing we really do about history, but we can try to set it up for a better future. To summarize, this is my first video. Nice to meet you guys. White privilege is a real thing. It does affect people in real ways. It does not get you discount at Walgreens. It's kind of just saying that white privilege doesn't mean that like you're not gonna have problems, just you being white isn't gonna be one of your problems. And us as a whole need to work together to try to correct the course of history as it's been now. Because there's nothing, Martin Luther King said, inherently positive about the flow of time. If we don't do anything about anything, it's not going to magically turn better. People aren't just going to magically become more empathetic and become more understanding. We actually have to put the work into making everything a more positive experience. Thank you for listening, and I'm out. Yay.